knows, I tend to go to film school and hire Jerry Goldsmith as my composer. That was my whole, that was what I was supposed to do, you know. And I just slipped into this by an accident.
Stu, did any film music influence you?
Oh, God. If you ask me for the first album I ever bought, you're asking me to remember back over half a century. I really should have brought their, I still have them, their 78s. I can't remember which one I bought first, but somewhere in my mind, I think the Egyptian. And I know I have a thing called Private Hell, something or other. Can't remember the Private Hell something.
Any?
36.
36, thank you. Those were the first albums I bought. As for influence, I had no intention of being a film composer in those days, so it wasn't like I was influenced by anybody. Alfred Newman, Victor Young, Bernard Herrmann. Those were the people that I went to the movies down at the Roxy or the in New York City or Music Hall or something, and saw these big extravagant pictures with the music, and I loved it. And I'd go out and I'd buy the 78 RPMs, and I'd listen to all this scratchy music. I got into film and TV composing as a sideline, almost like John did. I was in the record business, and it was part of a contractual deal with Columbia Pictures. And even though I studied composition at Eastman School of Music and went to Music and Art High School, so I had all the chops to do it, but I had that wasn't my bag at that particular point. And I just got into it contractually and did my first movie almost like somebody back here said, like they didn't know what they were doing, you know, like I never did a movie before. Well, who cares? Well, that's what I did. The first movie I did with a little stopwatch. And we broke the film down with there was no music editor, there was a film editor, and he and I broke it down, and we figured that the closest I could get would be about a third of a second. So we broke everything down to a third of a second, and all a bunch of handwritten notes that I did sitting there with the moviola. And that was the first picture. I didn't know what a streamer was, I didn't know what a click track was. I recorded up in Harlem in some studio up there, and conducted with this stopwatch, no picture or anything else. And I listened or play the music now or looked at the movie, and there's nothing wrong with it. And after all the intelligent things about click tracks and streamers and all the electronic devices we have now, that picture still works. All the music's in sync. Whether it's good or bad, it's a matter of opinion, but you know, it's not bad enough to be thrown out of the movie. They kept it in the movie, and that was it. That was my first picture, and that was in 1960.
You really should read the book. No, seriously, I read that cover to cover. It's really a great story.
Anyway, I told you the right story, right?
Well, that doesn't do it justice. I mean, it's a really. Have you read this, too? It's like his whole life story is amazing.
Anyway, that's basically how I got into it. It was, and from that point on, I had a bunch of #1 hit records, and they didn't want to pay me a lot of money, so they made a deal with me and gave me a 3-picture deal at companies that did 3 motion pictures, because they knew I had done that one picture before, and I took it. I don't know why. It's one of those things that you do in your career. Like I look back at it and say, "What the hell did I do then?" Here I am, a successful A&R man. I'm making #1 records all over the thing, and why in the world did I do that? But I did it, and I did the first picture for Columbia, Math in the Diners Club with Danny Kaye. And from that point on, I think everybody knows what I did. If not, like, I don't know.
Michael, how about you?
So we're in triumvirate. Bugs Bunny, Kiss, and Star Wars. Those were probably the 3 things that threw in a pot that made me notice film music and music for picture. I didn't grow up in a house where music was a really big thing. Everybody in my family works in computer science or banking or law school. I mean, they're all of that ilk. I was the black sheep in the family. We barely had any record albums in the house growing up, but what I used to do is watch television and just listen to the music in shows like Night Stalker. I remember hearing Planet of the Apes the first time on television. That was something that really stuck with me. And that's where my original interest in music for picture came from. I kind of veered off as I got older into doing metal. I was in a bunch of hair bands. You know, the whole spandex wearing, long hair, the whole 9 yards. Did that for a while, and that, the whole time I was doing that, I also continued to keep going to see films and just got more into listening to people. Danny Elfman was particularly influential on me. Alan Silvestri, who later on became a mentor. I really love his music. And also, there was a point during college where I was lucky enough to have an RA who introduced me. This was right at the time when new wave was really breaking in the mid '80s, and he would bring albums up from his room. They were just below us, and he'd say, you know, here's Joy Division or Skinny Puppy or somebody like that, and check this out. And he was actually the first person to introduce me to 9 Inch Nails, which changed my life, and that was something that. Between the orchestral side of it and the electronic side of it, I thought it would be really cool to be able to bring those two worlds together, and it seemed like film was a great place to do that. And I'm just a big fan of music in general, but it was something that, because of the home that I grew up in, I kind of had to do it out of sheer will, because I wasn't really surrounded by that growing up.
Lucas, was there an album you bought that made you say to yourself, I can start a record label?
No, my record label started sort of accidentally, but were you going to go all the way?
Well, no, you first. You're next.
Well, I wanted to ask the composers something.
Go for it.
Can we do, like, I mean, and like Family Feud style, like top, you know, like what's the? I was just curious quickly. Like, what might be the hardest thing about your job that people wouldn't think is the hardest, but actually is the hardest, and also what might be, and just go down through you guys and see.
Boy, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Should I jump in?
Yeah.
Please do.
Okay.
My answer's probably longer. So.
I bet we're Where do gonna you start?
start.
I bet we might all have a similar answer. For me, right now, the atmosphere in Hollywood is such that you've got committees of people chiming in on music, and many times, most times, none of them can. There is no consensus. So that for me. Some of the hardest things I have to do are trying to be true to what I want to write, and yet also try to please about 8 or 18 people. It's impossible. So at the end of the day, I think the best case scenario that I have experienced is that you give it your best shot, you do what you think it should be, and then if you get shot down, you do it 5, 6, 7, 8 more times. And at the end of the day, you know, there is a finite period of when we need to finish these things.
That's the problem.
Is this the,
Yeah,
would everyone
and
have
so,
a similar answer?
For me and John, you know,
Well, you have your. I have to plot out on the calendar. I have to look at the wall and know, okay, there's the date, and then as soon as the cue goes down in flames, my whole thing falls like a house of cards. I'm like, what do I do now? So you can't afford for them not to like a cue, or you're screwed, you know. And so then you're writing under just like.
yeah,
Too much pressure, you know, it's not fun.
That's my feeling, that these days, whereas maybe, you know, I'd love to hear from all different sides of this thing. If you have a director, he or she, that has a vision, and they're strong, and they take a stand, right or wrong, that's a great thing.
Yes.
But many times it's, love it, we're done. 24 hours later, there's a preview, for instance, and maybe some of your music is in there, maybe it's not. But the preview doesn't go well, and then they throw it all out. So I think for me that basically,
Or your
it's
friends go, oh, you're done now. They're dubbing the movie now. You should be relaxed. Like,
Yeah.
When that phone rings, I'm
That's
like,
what's in
holy
the theater.
shit.
That's the worst.
I'm sorry,
So-
Dan had a plan for this, and I think I've hijacked it.
Yeah, you two though.
Once you light that fuse, it's going to
It's like
start
the
going.
Pelham 1, 2, 3, but the
Okay.
original.
I don't know John.
Which is his
I don't know
first-
John over here. John and I just met, but these two sing that they've done huge franchise movies. Just first off, the $100 million movies. it's not like you're sitting around with your bong in your studio coming up with the coolest shit. Okay, then you've got a franchise, especially once you've had one installment of that's been successful. It becomes a big corporate product, and for any of your original voice to affect that is a testament to how strong a voice you have as a composer, and clearly both these guys have done it time and again successfully, which is, there's so much that you have no idea that goes on. I mean, I'm still scratching my head at every turn in my business, and sometimes it's just awesome. Like the reason I do Californication, it's like eating a donut. It's awesome. It's just like, we don't even spot the show. They send me the shows, never changed a cue in 4 seasons. You know, they're just like, whatever you want to do. That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist in reality. All that does is help.
That exists in television more than it does in reality, because television has to go on the air one way or the other. The picture doesn't have to open on the 18th, it can open a month later.
Right.
Television has got an air date, and it's, by God, it's going to go on.
Oh, I wrote 4 shows this week, and they mixed, you know. So, I mean, but, you know, like both Johns here were commenting on, it is so difficult to get people politically to come up with a consensus, because if you try and push that along too much, then you can be seen as a little bit combative, and you're just trying to be the guy who's here to take care of it whenever you have some direction and you need to discern which direction to follow. So there's a story behind every movie that nobody knows.
Remember the writers?
Yeah.
The writers go through the same thing that you go through. The sketch set decorators, they all go through the same bullshit that the director knows everything and you don't know anything. You don't know diddly squat, all right?
That's so true.
Dan's gonna kill me. It's
Can
a
I
shame
put-
none of you got paid for it.
Guys, can I just take a quick, this is a quick, like hands up or down?
Go for it.
Really quick, Dan?
Go for it.
I'm curious how many of us here at this table think that the consensus has made your work better.
The what?
How often does the group effort, the
committee?
the committee, how often do you think that really makes your score better?
Every time.
What's going on?
Enough said.
My hands are full.
And how many more tickets? How many more tickets has it sold? Do you think, honestly?
Right.
Well, I mean, what they do is they take the soul of the store away. I mean, it's like, you know, there's an excitement, there's a in you initially that they manage to screw, you know.
Yeah.
And so you sit there in anger, and I have this problem. I sit and as soon as I like a cue, I'm like, oh, that's great. Oh, they're gonna fucking hate it. And then I sit there pissed off for a week writing, assuming they're just gonna hate it anyway. And so I write in anger. It's the thing. And then most of the time they're fine with it, but I just assume, yeah.
And your brown liquor and sleeping pills.
And I
Oh,
think,
Xanax, forget it.
I think part of the problem is that the consensus starts before you even get hired with the temp score.
Yep.
You know,
They-
Well, I have a
nobody-
confession to make. I do temp tracks for my bread and butter.
Oh,
So
yeah.
actually, what they've done in the back, they built a big
Satan
wicker man,
lives
and
down
then
the
they're going
table.
to actually place me in it. And then I'm going to be burned. I'm going to be playing like all the stuff I used to screw everyone up here with.
Dan, I love temp scores as long as they don't play them for me.
I know, exactly. In my dream world, I wish
I
that
must
was
have been
that.
lucky for 50
That is the
years.
allure
I
of
never
indie movies, though.
had a temp score except the one that I temped.
wow.
I had a temp Battlestar Galactica, all 3 hours of it, and myself and the music editor did it ourselves. So I did my own temp
I think
score.
it'd be wonderful if the composer
Otherwise,
never
I
heard
never-
what I did
never had a temp
ever
score.
in my dream world. Lucas, again, a big reason I think that you have the insane collector's market where stuff 3,000 copies gone in about 2 hours is really because of the work that you started with Pelham 123. Just I don't think people had really seen this kind of CD before Film Score Monthly started out. Was there a label like a soundtrack that you bought that you said I can do this better? I want to do this.
It's a wonderful coupon.
I don't. The first CD we ever did, it was because we were doing a magazine article about the score, and then it just sort of turned into a record album. I always thought we could do better liner notes.
And you have.
And we have. I thought we were going to have a.
No, it's all
No one
together.
wants to hear that.
We want